Good evening and welcome to Let's Talk About It, where we bring you topics from near and far. Tonight we have with us a very, very exciting guest, Mr. Arnold Sampson, and I am Elizabeth Johnson, your host for tonight's show. We're going to be back in a moment to talk about Mr. Sampson's book entitled Dustoff More Than Met the Eye. It's all about his adventures in Vietnam as a helicopter evacuation pilot. So we're going to be back in a moment. So don't go away. Welcome back. As I said to you, we have with us Mr. Arnold Sampson, the author of the book entitled Dustoff More Than Met the Eye. He was a medical evacuation helicopter pilot during the Vietnam War, which is a very, very turbulent time in American history. He has written this book, and it tells all about the missions that he flew, which required very, very skilled operations. And it also required him to fly into areas that were full of fire, enemy fire, and a lot of conflict. And so I welcome Mr. Arnold Sampson. Mr. Sampson, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good to meet you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. These missions required a lot of courage, a great deal of courage for him to go into these areas where his helicopter did not even have ammunition. It didn't even have a gun. It was just him and his helicopter. And these helicopters were a beacon of hope for a lot of people really who required medical attention. And he had to go in and pick up the ones who were wounded and take them to get medical help. Mr. Sampson, whatever required you to do these kinds of things, being someone from Baltimore, someone really who really had no experience in this kind of thing. When the world acquired you led you up to writing this book in a time of, or even joining the military at such a explosive time in our history?
Thank you for asking that question, Ms. Johnson. It's a great question. The truth is, though I'm a Baltimorean and Baltimore may be known for social issues, etc., I'm also a Morgan graduate, and at Morgan I was involved with ROTC, the Reserve Officers Training Corps, for 4 years. And at the end of my 4 years at Morgan, the day I graduated from Morgan, I was also commissioned into the U.S. Army's Medical Service Corps as a second lieutenant. And when newly commissioned officers, report to active duty, they go to their branch school. Mine was in San Antonio, Texas, at Fort Sam Houston. And I ended up being exposed to a film that described what the medical evacuation helicopter mission was all about. I thought it was heroic, very, very titillating to me. And when the film was over, the instructor asked if anyone wanted to volunteer for flight training, aviator training. And I would speculate that about 13 hands went up. I didn't look around, but that's what I'm guessing. And out of the 13, 6 of us ultimately qualified for flight school. And 8 months of intense training, 4 in Texas and 4 in Georgia. And then after a month's leave, I guess to prepare your will and to give away your dog and put your car in storage. After that month's leave, I was sent to Vietnam. So it was a natural progression of events that was necessary because the war consumed our country and involved as many young men as the Army could get its little hands on.
Well, what made you write this book? What's the book about, and what made you write it?
An excellent question. Thank you for asking that. I wrote the book because I wanted I wanted people to know what soldiers go through, not just for Vietnam, but for almost any war. I wanted people to know what people go through who go into the military. The military is a different world from the civilian world. It involves sacrifice. It involves suspense. It involves isolation at times. And so some of the men who went to Vietnam did not come back. Well, most of the men who went to Vietnam did not come back as the same people who went there and same persons who went there. And so I wanted to describe some things that happened that I observed or was involved in to give the reader an idea of what their neighbor, their uncle, their grandfather, co-worker may have experienced, which might explain what their viewpoint is, and why they are different from other people who had not been exposed to the same hazards.
Well, in that you had that desire to get this message across, what do you think that in your experience, what do you think that young people can garner from your experience? And what do you think that they could do with what you learned and what happened to you? What could they, how could they learn from it? What experiences could they put into their life that would enable them to do great and wonderful things like you've done?
Well, you're very kind to say great and wonderful things. I'll say that the military gives a person, helps a young man develop self-discipline. It kind of gives you a sense of, it lets you know that what your skills are, your capability is of developing new skills, and it gives you, if you survive it, it gives you a sense of character that you might not otherwise have. And so I would advocate that any able-bodied man, young man who has any interest at all in developing himself and in learning new skills and gaining new experiences, that they consider the military, exposure to the military, because relatively few men leave it and don't say, I'm better off for that experience. So that's I think that Baltimoreans, some Baltimorean young men perhaps don't actually get a chance to get involved in some positive experiences. And I think the military would be a positive experience for them.
But you know, as I was talking with you about this earlier, and we were exploring all about the book, I just really wanted that you were an African American. And being a helicopter pilot back in those days, I
Hmm.
would think that would be an awfully difficult thing to be able to be a part of, being a pilot. So, how did that happen? Did you experience any kind of racial indifferences and things that happened to you as a result of being an African American?
That is a very sage and insightful question, Mrs. Johnson. The fact is, when I was during the 2 months I was at Fort Sam Houston, the Martin Luther King was assassinated. A very, very difficult moment for our history, a very, very difficult moment for my culture. And it really created turmoil in our society that was very troubling. Yes, the military did pose some challenges. The military had not too long become integrated, and some of the old attitudes and limitations and parameters were still there in the memories, institutional memories that existed. So there were challenges, and the truth is, um, as welcoming as the Army wanted to be for Black officers, there was a certain discomfort, and there was that they experienced. And aviators, um, Blacks were not thought to be all that well suited for the field of aviation. So the same way Tiger Woods is an exception to the normal rule of demographic rule, in the field in the game of golf, and the Venus and Serena were exceptions in tennis. Aviation was posed its challenges, but the truth is, when you in terms of what I was doing, it was so important that people be extracted from the field. So important that people be gotten quickly as possible to medical facilities. Then all of a sudden, color didn't matter. It was, can you get out there safely, navigate to the middle of nowhere with no GPSs, just using map coordinates, pick up a wounded man or men, and get them back to a medical facility without getting shot down yourself, and get them there alive. I'm delighted to say that I never transported a person who didn't arrive at the medical facility we flew them to alive. I feel good about that. But the truth is, I was a pilot. The crew consisted of a crew chief, a medic, and two pilots. And so one pilot was called the pilot, sometimes called the Peter pilot. I don't know why. And the other person was called the aircraft commander. And so the thrill of my experience really started when I became the aircraft commander, which was 7 months into my tour. Before then, I was really in training. I was doing OJT, but frankly, I think I needed it. And when I was finally given aircraft commander orders, I was ready. And I'm delighted to say. So I'm pleased about the experience. I'm pleased that I didn't harm anyone in that.
There was just something that you said about being thrilled that no one was injured. And I see that picture in back of you, and I can see your eyes, and you look rather horrified to me. Weren't you scared to death doing this? You were so young, and you were there in this position. Is that a bullet hole behind you in that
Actually,
helicopter?
I was almost an old man compared to some of the youngsters who served in Vietnam. That they average age was maybe something like 18 and a half or 19 years old. I think at the time I was about 23, because I'd gone to grad school after I finished college, and before I reported to active duty. And the photo you're referring to right here, and you see the bullet hole. That photo was taken by a medic in my chopper after we had landed, following a kind of a daunting mission. And years later, he and I crossed paths online, and he said, "I've got a photo I want to share with you." And that bullet hole was the bullet that just missed, came in the chopper right behind my helmet. And I mean, just a couple inches more, and we wouldn't be having this interview. But the truth is, at the time, the only way we could continue, we laughed about it. I took a photo of his side of the aircraft where the bullet had come through a window near his head. And we taped the window just to show where the glass had broken out, changed aircraft, and took off again for another mission. If you didn't get right back on the horse, then you might not want to get back on the horse. So we did that. It was interesting. That is not a situation where I was actually wounded. I do have two Purple Hearts, but that was not one of the times that I actually got any of the shrapnel. What you see is the gnarled metal there. Could have become missiles themselves, but in this case it didn't. The bullet was looking for me, but it didn't have my name on it. As it was coming through, I took out my ballpoint pen and I wrote AIRA for air, so that it would go into the air and try to find. I said, find some air, not some HAIR, some hair. Okay, that was a crazy thing to say. I'm so sorry.
That was very smart. I like that, It was good. I read your book and I was very fascinated. I took it with me on vacation and I read it the entire time I was on vacation on the ship. And there was one part that was particularly touching to me when you talked about one of your hooch companions who got shot, and he stumbled over to you where you were with a bullet in his tummy or something like that? Am I remembering that correctly? Well, that
Um,
was one. Let me tell you about another instance that really affected me very deeply. When you talk
okay.
about a young girl, the child
Mm,
that picked up at the field and had to take for medical intervention.
right.
Tell us about that.
Um, I my unit had two field sites, meaning we were stationed in Chulai, but we kept a helicopter in a place called Bami, which was very near the DMZ, the military zone in Vietnam. And we also kept a helicopter crew in a place called um, I'm sorry, I'm pausing because when I think about that child, it almost it always evokes memories that are
Do we
um,
stop talking
sad.
about that then?
No. I will talk about it. I'll just try to control the emotions. I will simply say we had another field standby site, and one morning at that standby site, I could see there was some activity at our Radio Shack, and I didn't know what it was. I was curious as to what was going on. I didn't think it could have been much of anything. It was a bright, pretty day, but I kind of strolled over there. I hadn't started flying yet, and I walked into this orderly room, and there were all these children mangled by a Claymore mine that had gone off, and they were being tended to by my crew and by some of the other medical crews that personnel who were at that site. This little girl was not being tended to, so I immediately gave her my attention to try. And it turned out she had gotten her elbow had been blown off, and fore, her forearm and her bicep were attached by just some cartilage. And and so I called for some gauze, some band-aids, and a roll of gauze, and started to try to keep that forearm and that bicep together, so that maybe they some kind of way doctors could save
Well,
her forearm. In the process, I noticed that she had already lost a leg, so she had already was on a she had like a prosthesis like Peg Leg Bates did, a dancer, a little round thing that was in replace of one of her legs, and it's embarrassing to say this a little, but the thing that struck me in the middle of all this was that she was so well dressed. I mean, her clothing were. I was used to children and seeing children from afar in black pajama-like material, silk pajama-like material, but she was in a little yellow dress, and she was in a real bad state, and I couldn't really talk to her in Vietnamese, but I looked at her, and she was looking at me. And I said, I don't want to hurt you, but I'm trying to save your arm. Of course, she didn't understand me, but we started kind of communicating with our eyes. And my eyes said to her, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. Just let me try to help you. I'll be as gentle as I possibly can be. And her eyes said to me, seemed to say, Mr. American, man, am I going to be all right? Does my mother know where I am? And my eyes said back to her, I don't think she knows yet what has happened, but we'll find her in time. But first thing first, let's try to get you stabilized. And then I saw her look past me at something behind me, and I thought maybe someone else had kind of come over to give me a hand because I clearly felt I was over my head, and there wasn't anybody there. And I looked back at her. Um, she she sort of stared, and at that point, I started holding my breath because I sensed that she was slipping away, and indeed, she did slip away, and she stopped breathing. Tiny little girl. Um, all these years, you think I'd gotten over this, but I really haven't, to tell you the truth. Um, yeah, so it was a moment, and I'm still carrying this memory after all these years is what I presume other veterans carry with them, the same pain of loss and sadness. So I don't want to over answer, Mrs. Johnson. I just wanted to respond to your recollection of the little girl incident.
Well, I certainly didn't want to take you to a place that was going to make you emotional. I really didn't. It's just when I was reading that in the book, I became emotional and just wondered, how do you get past things like that? But clearly you don't. Those are things that really stick with you forever and a day. And so
Yes.
then you mentioned something about your Purple Hearts.
Okay, and let me say now, just since I've gotten the story out, the place was Duck Pho. I think it's spelled D-U-C, and Pho is P-H-O. Just an interesting thing I'm going to say, just to sort of try to recenter myself. There are places, the restaurants, the Vietnamese restaurants, where you'll see the name Pho, P-H-O, but the Vietnamese call it Pho. Who knew? We always called it, referred to it as Duck Pho, but we didn't know that their pronunciation was Duck Pho. But back to your question about the Purple Hearts, you said.
Yeah, you mentioned about the Purple Hearts, and I'm just wondering about commendations. Were there special commendations that people got for what they did in Vietnam? Because clearly you were doing things beyond just flying your helicopter. You were practically a medic.
Well, that was one of the few times that I actually had to act as a medic. Most of the time, I was just serving as a pilot, trying to figure out how to safely get a big old loud helicopter into an LZ, a landing zone, how to um, find the courage to sit there and then figure out a way to exit it without us getting shot up on the way out. Um, in terms of commendations, yes, I mean, commendations were the farthest thing from my mind when I was doing it. But ultimately, I was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross, a Bronze Star, two Purple Hearts, a Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with Silver Star device for heroism, 5 awards of the Air Medal with V device for heroism, um, a Broken Wing Award, which I'm really proud of. It was given, it's not given very often, but the Broken Wing Award is awarded when you have an aircraft that should have not been able to be flown or landed safely. And I managed to get an aircraft down that had been damaged by a bullet that had come through the windshield and gone into the engine housing. And I got it down in one piece without anybody being injured and the aircraft being further damaged.
Well, without a doubt.
I'm very proud of that Broken Wing Award. I'm proud of all of that, to tell you the truth.
What does the
So it was
broken
just,
does
I'm
the
sorry,
broken
what you said.
specify anything specific that it's a broken wing?
Yeah, it indicates that that you have beaten that the pilot, the awarded person, beat the odds and managed to land an helicopter that was disabled, an aircraft that was disabled and that shouldn't have been landable. So I feel proud that God was with me, and that just guided me to get it down in one piece. And years later, one of the crewmen on board, his name was Bernard Ojeda, um, wrote me a letter and thanked me for saving his life. He said, "You saved us, sir." He said, "I would not have had grandchildren. I wouldn't even be alive if you had not gotten that aircraft down. Thank you for your skills and your courage."
Well, I want to thank you for your skills, your courage, and your service, because this has been an enlightening conversation for me and hopefully our listeners. It lets us know really some things, like you say, things that didn't meet the eye, what you men went through in that conflict. Well, we're calling it a conflict. So then hopefully it's an inspiration for young people who are trying to find their way in the world, that they will want to do things that would make them accountable for their life and what they have and all that they've got. So all I can just say is thank you for your service. Once again, I apologize for taking you someplace that was just making you emotional. And maybe we'll have you back again some other time. So
Well,
thank you
thank
again
you.
so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your even thinking about my book, Dust Off More Than Met the Eye. And I apologize for my emotions. The Some of the experiences were difficult, and they left an indelible mark on my memories and on my heart. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate on this show. So have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Well, folks, thanks so much for joining us. Let's Talk About It is designed to educate, communicate, motivate, uplift, and inspire the world. I'm Elizabeth Johnson, your host for tonight's show. Join us again next time.